Hello and welcome to the Talking Atlanta Hawks Hoops podcast. I'm your host, Mikey Kubitsky, and today we'll be doing the preview and predictions for the second round of the NBA playoffs. I have a guest here. You can introduce yourself.
My name is Jack Tresh. I will be joining Mikey to talk some NBA playoffs. We got great first round action. We have the Clippers and Mavericks going to 7 games. Kawhi Leonard dropped 45. And there will be a Game 7 this Sunday. As we try to predict the second round matchups and your winners, your losers, who's going to do well, we have to take into account that we don't have a true answer for this Game 7, so we're gonna do our best to predict both scenarios.
Yeah. So as we segue into that, so we're gonna be trying to predict both scenarios: Utah and Clippers, and then Utah and Mavericks. So, which one would you like to start off with?
I think we should take into account if Kawhi Leonard can perform the same way he did last night, then, of course, Clippers at home, even though there's not been a home win in that series.
Yeah, crazy. NBA history right there.
Yeah, exactly. 6 straight road wins in a playoff series. If Kawhi Leonard can perform the way he did last night and they can carry that momentum into the Jazz series, I think we'll see Utah struggling a lot with how to contain some of the Clippers' other options. Of course, Reggie Jackson stepped up big last night.
20 points, of course.
If Kawhi carries that momentum, you'll see more focus on him, less on Paul George. You'll open up people like Nicholas Batum, and just plenty of options that the Clippers have. But the key is that they got to move the ball, they got to make plays. A lot of times they've been relying just on ISO and pick and roll, which I'm not counting as a play here. I've said before, they don't play like a team, they play like a collection of highly talented individuals. They need to play like a team if they're going to beat the Jazz.
Yeah.
But otherwise, I would say the Jazz will beat the Clippers in 6 games.
Yeah, I actually agree with that. I think the Jazz will beat the Clippers in 6 games. I just think, especially with the Clippers, like Jack said, their biggest thing is ball movement. And with the perimeter defenders the Jazz have, Georges Niang, Donovan Mitchell, Royce O'Neal, Joe Ingles, his size will be really good, especially at the 3 or the 2 position. They definitely do have defenders to throw at Kawhi and Paul George, and even Reggie Jackson if he steps up and becomes their third scoring option over this series. And I just think the Jazz are a more complete team. They move the ball around a lot, shoot a lot of threes, and also Rudy Gobert. Ivica Zubac, even though he hasn't got a lot of run in the Mavericks series because Luka mismatch it with Zubac has been terrible for Zubac. I think Zubac will see a lot of run in this series because the length, especially against Gobert, will be needed. And then also he'll have a size advantage if the Jazz go ahead and play Derek Favors, which they have all season at the backup center. So Ivica Zubac will definitely be an X factor in that series and see how well he can perform. But overall, yes, I'd still say with Jack, the Jazz will win it in 6 games just because I think they're more a complete team. And that core team has been together many more years than the Clippers. So their chemistry definitely, I think, will be shown in that series.
Absolutely. I think you brought up a great point with Ivica Zubac. And, of course, his length and size will play a very large part into hopefully the Clippers' success if they can piece together what's not been working to them. But Gobert has shown himself to be very skilled playing the center position for the Jazz, very skilled at locking down the paint, probably taking home the Defensive Player of the Year award.
Yeah.
With Gobert laying around the paint, with Zubac not being able to stretch the floor well, you may see the Clippers rely on someone like Ibaka if he can come back healthy, or even Marcus Morris sometimes at the 5, so that they can stretch the floor, get Gobert out of the paint, and you can get Kawhi and Paul George to attack the rim.
Yeah, they've even done that with Dallas sometimes too. They've been playing Nicholas Batum sometimes at center. I mean, at 6'9", he's capable of playing a center, and that will definitely give them a speed advantage, and they can play with a faster pace against. They've done that against Porzingis and sometimes Boban with the Mavericks. So yeah, overall, both of our predictions. If the Jazz face the Clippers in the second round, it's Jazz in 6.
Jazz in 6.
And so now on to the Dallas Mavericks scenario. If Dallas can pull off Game 7, Luka will have to have a great game. It's just plain and simple. Porzingis just really hasn't even been a factor in this series, and really in the regular season he wasn't healthy really. So this is just like a lost season for Porzingis. And honestly, I don't know if he's on this team next year, but we'll get into that later. I think the key, if the Mavericks move on, will be getting Boban Marjanovic in the game. Because even against the Clippers, you've seen that when the Clippers go small, they've given Boban Marjanovic touches, and they've ran post plays for him to get touches in the paint against a smaller lineup if they're running Marcus Morris or Nick Batum at center. And especially against Rudy Gobert, they'll need that height of Porzingis and Boban to match Rudy Gobert. And I'd like to see them give the plays that they're given to Boban to Porzingis, because the Jazz are small in terms of their power forward position. If they run Derek Favors at backup center, their backup power forward could be Georges Niang, and he's small for a backup power forward. And even their starting power forward, Bojan Bogdanovic or Royce O'Neal, they're too small for Porzingis. So I'd like to see him post up, and I think that'll be a key factor for the Dallas Mavericks to have a chance in this series.
I definitely agree with you. What do you think? How many games and who's going to take the series if it's the Clippers?
I just
Jazz?
think the Jazz are again just more of a complete team, similar to the Clippers. The Mavericks rely on their star Luka to have a great game, and if he doesn't have a great game, even though Tim Hardaway Jr. has been really, really good for them and actually been better than Porzingis in that trade, who would have thought? But I don't think they'll beat the Jazz. I see the Jazz winning in 5 or 6 games, same as the Clippers, basically.
I think the biggest key, I'd like to say that whatever happens in this Game 7, as I mentioned with Kawhi, it's all about momentum. They've got to take what they did in that game in the one of the biggest stages in basketball and use that to push them through into the next round, which is a much more competitive game. You have a team like the Jazz, they're gritty, they like to run. Perimeter and interior defense, they are very skilled. You're going to need guys to step up. He mentioned Tim Hardaway Jr. Tim Hardaway Jr. needs to be that second option if Porzingis is not going to make himself available, if Porzingis is not going to score. Porzingis also at 7'3" needs to get rebounds. Gobert cannot control the boards. That's got to be the key. You got to keep Gobert out of the paint.
Yep.
Luka has shown himself as one of the wonders of the NBA at his very young age, and there's going to be a lot of focus on him. But if you have someone like Donovan Mitchell, or even you could see them put Royce O'Neal, who's a very, very skilled perimeter defender, someone who's very gritty, someone who's going to out-hustle you. Very physical and skilled perimeter defender. It is very important that Luka attacks, not to shy away from that. He can shoot the long ball from deep, but again, it's about getting Rudy Gobert out of the paint, because he controls the paint in the league like very few other NBA players. And if he can attack and you can have Porzingis starting to hit shots, or Tim Hardaway Jr., or really anyone that can...
Dorian Finney-Smith
to step up for the Mavericks. I feel like they could maybe force a Game 6 against the Utah Jazz. But the Utah Jazz, as you mentioned, a much more complete team, so I'm gonna have to go Jazz in 5.
Jazz in 5, okay. And So now we move on to the second one of the second series of the West. This one is set in stone. The Denver Nuggets will face the Phoenix Suns, and right away the thing I look at is the most important thing in this series is Jokic versus Ayton. Jokic definitely in the first series showed why he's probably going to be the league MVP, and DeAndre Ayton, as young as he is, it's definitely gonna be tough to guard Jokic, but DeAndre Ayton definitely has the quickness advantage and the athleticism advantage against Jokic, and I think he'll need to use that. The Suns, I think, will want to play really fast, even though Chris Paul, I know at his age doesn't like to play very fast. I know the Suns were bottom part of the league in terms of pace this year, but I think it'll be a great advantage for the Suns if they play fast. If they get into the half-court game, you're going to have to rely on either Ayton guarding Jokic, and we don't know how that'll work yet in the playoffs. And Ayton being young and Jokic being a guy who had 5 30-point games in the Portland series, five 30-point games in the Portland series. So it's either going to be relying on Ayton to guard that or double teaming Jokic, and you know that double teaming Jokic can lead to him having those double-digit big assist games, and if he can score as well, that's a recipe for disaster for the Suns.
I think you mentioned a great point, how Chris Paul likes to slow down the game. For the Phoenix Suns, it's really going to be about them controlling the tempo, them not letting people like Michael Porter Jr. and Campazzo, who likes to push the floor, both those guys very quick and very precise in transition. If Chris Paul can use his many years of experience as what you can consider an NBA superstar, you can probably see that the Utah Jazz will take that series not the Utah Jazz, the Phoenix Suns will take that series in 6 games, but you gotta slow down the pace of the Nuggets. You gotta make them work for that half-court offense. If you can force the Nuggets into a half-court offense, you can see 3-and-D guys like Jay Crowder really step up, and that's one advantage that I think the Phoenix Suns have is perimeter defense.
Yeah, especially perimeter defense. You can throw guys like Mikal Bridges, a great defender, at Michael Porter. You'll probably have Chris Paul guarding Facu Campazzo, and while Chris Paul probably not as fast as he used to be, he's a smart defender. He's still above average defender in this league probably, and he'll know what to do. But another matchup I have is another detail that I have that will dramatically shift the series in the Suns' favor probably is PJ Dozier, and he's not a household name. His struggles at the free throw line were noted in the bubble against the Lakers and all that on offense, but for defense, PJ Dozier is probably the Nuggets' best perimeter defender, and he wasn't healthy for the Portland series, and I'm not sure if he plays in the Suns series. I don't know if he'll be 100%, but if he could guard Devin Booker, the Nuggets might actually have a better chance. But I'm going to say that the Suns are going to win this series in 7 or 6 games. I'll probably say 7, just because of how dominant Jokic was against a good defender in Nurkic. So I believe he'll probably do it again against Ayton.
I'm gonna stay with the Phoenix Suns in 6 games, simply just because one aspect we didn't mention was the comparison of the benches. Of course, Denver has struggled with some injuries. You have players like Paul Millsap, who slowed down a bunch coming off the bench, but Monte Morris, or as I like to say, Monte Maurice, has had some great scoring games in the first round against Portland, but they've really got to step up when those primary options, when your starters go off the court, and you got to be able to stop guys. Cameron Payne has had great games. Yeah. And Torrey Craig, great defender off the bench, and Dario Saric has always been a pretty efficient player. It's all about Denver just quenching those guys off the bench, and if there's non-Jokic, non-Michael Porter Jr.,
Where's the offense going to come from?
Non-Aaron Gordon minutes, where's the offense coming from? Exactly. So I'm going to have to go Suns in 6.
Yeah, and we also, just casually forgot to mention Devin Booker was amazing. Was amazing in that first round against the Lakers, and he'll probably be able to put up some massive point games against Denver too, especially if PJ Dozier isn't there. Don't forget, this Denver team is missing Will Barton, PJ Dozier, and of course Jamal Murray too. And if Jamal Murray was in this series, I'd probably pick Denver in 6, but I don't know if Jokic will be able to do, and the guards for the Nuggets like Austin Rivers, who stepped up huge in that Portland series, and Monte Morris will be able to do against the Suns what they did to the Trailblazers, because the perimeter defense with the Trailblazers is like non-existent. As much as I like Damian Lillard and CJ McCollum, they just can't defend. They're small, but they're not physical defenders, and the Suns do have those guys. And Chris Paul's still a good defender. Devin Booker's a big body at the 2. Torrey Craig can even guard the perimeter as well. So I think it's going to be tough for the Nuggets, and I think the Suns will win it in 6 games.
Last point, since we almost forgot to mention D-Book, is that if you look at the starting lineup of the Denver Nuggets, if they're run it the same way, they're a bit short on perimeter defender, as you mentioned. Will Barton being out, he's a very talented defender, and not having a guy like that to throw at Devin Booker is going to make him very dangerous for the Denver Nuggets.
Yeah. So basically, the Nuggets injuries are a big reason why, but overall, I think we're both going. You're picking the Phoenix Suns at 5.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to go with 6 games. Phoenix
5 or
Suns.
6, yeah.
All right. So now on to probably the most anticipated matchup of the second round: the Bucks and the Nets, which begin tonight. And this matchup's going to be so fun to watch. It's going to be a matter of can the Brooklyn Nets make the Bucks play at their pace? Because if that's so, I think it's Nets in 6. If they can make it into a full court game and it's a scoring race between the Nets and the Bucks, and there's barely any defense being played because it's such a fast-paced game, that gives the Nets a huge advantage. And if that's the case, again, Nets in 6.
I think one thing that the Bucks need to do, as I mentioned with the Suns, is control the tempo. You have to, if you're going to start Brook Lopez as center, if you're Milwaukee and you're starting that size, you've often seen lineups with Brooklyn where DeAndre Jordan has been out of the rotation for the playoffs. They've had a very small, very mobile lineup. And of course, playmakers like Kyrie, Durant, Harden, and being able to set up Griffin, Harris, Jeff Green,
Bruce Brown.
Bruce
He's
Brown,
been huge for them.
Landry Shamet. You got to stop the Nets' mobility, and it'll be interesting to see what they do with Brook Lopez, who is a bit slower than everybody. The other thing about the Milwaukee Bucks is find your shooters. They lost DiVincenzo. He's out for the season, unfortunately. But Giannis is going to have a very easy time, I think, being able to get into the lane.
Oh, for sure.
However, it's going to get very crowded down there. He's going to need to find Chris Middleton. He's going to need to find Drew Holiday, who needs to hit his shots.
Bryn Forbes, huge in that first round series.
They've got to hit their shots. Giannis has to be aggressive and keep attacking, because you've seen Giannis try to slow down the pace and try to rely on the 3 ball. That's not going to work for them. If you get into a half-court offense, you give it to Chris Middleton or Drew Holiday, and they make the play. Yeah,
and that's where the Nets get you, because I talked all about the full court, and if they can make it a full court game, the Nets are going to win this series. But even in the half court, they have 3 elite shot makers and playmakers. So even in the half court, I think the Nets offense is just going to be too much. And Giannis in the half court is, as much as a superstar that he is, he's a liability in the half court. You can't really rely on his 3-point shooting or his free throw shooting. I mean, you can post him up, but you're going to probably have Kevin Durant guarding Giannis. And while Giannis may be stronger than KD, they're both the same size, so it's not like Giannis can shoot his fade away from the baseline that he likes to do a lot on the post. So I just don't see how the Bucks can slow down the Nets' high-powered offense. It's overall what I'm saying. And on the Ball Don't Stop podcast, always Ekram Nagra makes really good points. And one of the things he always says about this game is about a bucket. And who can get the most buckets in the series? It's the Nets. While Drew Holiday and Chris Middleton are good shot creators, they're not at the upper echelon that Kyrie, Harden, and KD are. But I think the Bucks definitely do stand a chance, but I think it'll be Nets in 6.
I think if the Bucks can slow down arguably the best ball handler of all time in Kyrie Irving, one of who I consider to be the top 5 scorers in NBA history, Kevin Durant, and of course another maybe even top 10 scorer, top 15 scorer in James Harden, who's also an incredible playmaker. You've seen him get high assist numbers. It's really for to really lock into Mike Budenholzer's defensive system. You got to get stops, and you cannot let the Nets play their style of play, which is, there may be less defense, but they're going to outscore you.
Yep.
You got to say, of course, the game is going to be about a bucket, because sometimes you play great defense, the better offense comes, no matter what. That's what you see with these 3 guys, and so Milwaukee has got to commit every play, every focus. You can't lock it. You got to stay locked in. Giannis, just because he's open doesn't mean he should take the 3.
Yeah.
You gotta get the right looks, and for that reason, for also someone who we forgot to mention was Joe Harris, who
can't double team those guys because you can't leave the best 3-point shooter over the last 2 years for percentage wise open.
Open. Right.
So what's your final prediction for the series?
So I'm gonna have to go Nets in 5.
Nets in 5. Wow.
Just because Joe Harris, he proved, I believe it was game 2 in the early minutes, hit like 3 straight threes, ripped the ball from Tatum, had a fast break layup. He's a guy that can step up. He's not there just lingering in the corner. He's out there trying. He's making plays, that's the Nets. Just a high-powered, high-octane offense. Almost unstoppable. So I'm going to have to go Nets in 5.
All right. So then now we go on to the last series. Obviously, the hometown Hawks going up against the Philadelphia 76ers. And this is the toughest series to predict. One of the guys I like to follow on Twitter and watches YouTube videos, Brian Suterer. He's a doctor who examines all these sports injuries and makes great content on YouTube. Go and check him out to see like what implication can these injuries have and how long he thinks players will be out. He even said there is no way to predict how Joel Embiid will feel if he's 100% and if he'll play. There is no timetable to predict. So in this series, and you've heard multiple analysts say that without Joel Embiid, you've heard Kendrick Perkins, you've heard Shaq say without Joel Embiid, they'll think the Hawks will win this series. And I also do believe that. But without Joel Embiid, Ben Simmons becomes a liability. And I think the Hawks can throw at Ben Simmons. John Collins can defend him. And then we'll have probably DeAndre Hunter to guard Tobias Harris. And Dwight Howard, if they played Dwight Howard at center, but they played Ben Simmons at center actually against the Wizards, and it worked out well. They won the game, so maybe they'll look to go to that again. So Clint Capella might be a matchup problem there if they go to Ben Simmons at center. But I believe that if Joel Embiid doesn't play in the series, I think the Hawks will take it in 6 games.
I believe you brought up, I don't know if it was the YouTuber you mentioned, but I did see a doctor talking about the Embiid injury, and if you look, what he was saying was if you look at Embiid, what it is a meniscus tear. A lot of the really bad meniscus tears you see, they're right where it moves, and so not only is it extremely painful, but it prohibits movement. Embiid, I don't want to say he got lucky because in no scenario is a meniscus tear lucky, but he has the fracture came not in the part that moves, but right under to the side. So it's still very moving. It's just the way they judge it is largely on a basis of how painful it is.
Okay, so he definitely is very much, in the words of the sense, day to day.
Yes. I think, though, you mentioned great points about how the Hawks, other than Clint Capella, who I'll get to in a second, have very versatile defenders to however the Sixers try to match up. You have Wright Hunter to throw at Harris. People, maybe it was just the Knicks hysteria or whatever, but DeAndre Hunter is one of the most underrated players in this league. You saw him not only lock up RJ Barrett, but outperform him too on the offensive end.
And lock up Julius Randle too.
Yes.
Julius Randle struggled in that series for sure because of Hunter.
DeAndre Hunter, of course, you saw while he was at Virginia take home a defensive award, NCAA Defensive Player of the Year, I believe. And then you saw when he went out, that number 1 seed team got upset by a 16th seed. DeAndre Hunter's defensive impact is very overlooked, and you can look at him to pressure Tobias Harris a lot, force him into either tough shots or force him to rely on someone like Ben Simmons or Embiid if he's healthy or to make a play. And then how can you forget about Seth Curry?
Seth Curry, underrated defender. By the way, that's his brother Steph has said a bunch of times that Seth is an underrated defender. People don't realize it, and I'm sure he's probably going to be guarding Bogdan Bogdanovic. And I think they'll throw Ben Simmons at Trae Young. I think they'll try that, which that could hinder Trae a lot. I mean, the size and quickness of Ben Simmons definitely going to be harder to get those threes off if they go under the screen because Ben Simmons' wingspan is so big, and then also their size in the paint. So I think Trae Young, as good as he is, he'll definitely have a harder time in this series than against the Knicks because of their perimeter defense.
Who would you think's going to guard Collins on the defensive end for the Sixers?
I think you'll see Tobias Harris guarding John Collins. But I mean, John Collins would have a matchup advantage there on the offensive end, but on the defensive end, because he's he's more athletic and stronger than Tobias Harris is. But as far as the defense, I don't know if John Collins can defend Tobias Harris, and which is why I think you made a good point there of throwing DeAndre Hunter at Tobias Harris and throwing John Collins at Ben Simmons to match athleticism with athleticism.
I think you're absolutely right. You mentioned that Collins does have an advantage on the offensive end. And really one thing that's overlooked for Collins, they overlook my Hawks a lot, is John Collins' postgame. With the the fast-paced offense of not only the Hawks but the entire league, you don't see a lot of those post looks for Collins anymore.
And that's where he can thrive.
John Collins can hit the fadeaway, can muscle his way inside, get a nice jump hook or easy layups. If the Sixers are locking up on the perimeter, I think you should get John Collins post touches. And the other biggest thing for the Hawks has been the pick and roll with a shooter coming up top to I believe on the weak side to linger around. That's where you've seen a lot of fourth quarter plays for the Hawks have been Trae and Clint Capella running a pick and roll, and then having Bogdanovic or someone like Kevin Huerter who shot unbelievably and actually defended pretty well in that first round. Having that shooter to kick back out to, because Trae Young. Enough with this foul baiting. Trae Young is one of the problem is not that Trae Young's looking for the fouls and the defenders are being weak or whatever. It's that Trae Young is one of the best in the league at getting himself into the lane. He's quick, he can dribble the ball, and really it's a dilemma for all teams when he and someone like John Collins are running a pick and roll. You your options are you either go over the screen and you allow Trey to get a drive, and then the center to help, which is, Trey can either float that right up or lob it to Collins. It's dangerous. He can kick it out to shooters if help is coming from anywhere else. And as I mentioned, his floater is just deadly. And you go under, Trey can shoot it from range. You gotta watch that guy at all times, because he's someone that can create off of passing just as much as he can create off of scoring.
Yeah. So for my final point here about this series will be the Embiid and Capella matchup. If Embiid plays, Capella definitely has a disadvantage on the perimeter against Embiid. Embiid, he has great feet work. He's notorious for doing Euro steps in the paint, and then even he can shoot the three a little bit, which Capella obviously can't. But if they go down into the paint and Joel Embiid wants post touches, which I know that a lot of analysts get on Embiid for shooting too many threes sometimes and not being physical, but Clint Capella's defensive prowess might force Joel Embiid into some perimeter shots, and especially with his slight meniscus tear, I don't know if he'll want to get as physical. And even if he plays, I don't think he'll be 100%. And that's an advantage. That's a matchup that the Hawks will probably look to take advantage of, especially mismatches. And then Clint Capella forcing Embiid to stay on the perimeter, opening up, keeping the 76ers at the perimeter and not in the paint, where Clint Capella is going to obviously block some shots, which he always does well.
A couple last points I want to make are how big the bench scoring is going to come into play. Of course, you have someone like Dwight Howard, George Hill coming off the bench to help out the Sixers.
Matisse Thybulle on the defensive end. That's the Hawks bench. Sorry, don't mean to interrupt you, but the Hawks bench is, I think, really going to struggle in this series. Really going to struggle, especially the perimeter guys. If we play Gallinari at center, you have Dwight Howard coming off center, who's, Gallinari will have a mismatch there at the perimeter. He'll be a little bit quicker than Dwight Howard, even though he's slower. But in the paint, I don't think the Hawks bench can get into the paint against the 76ers defense on their bench.
Absolutely. I think one thing that people missed in the Hawks-Knicks series was how unorganized the Hawks bench unit looked. And when I say bench, I mean both Trey and Bogdan out. If you looked after the Game 2 loss, where many people were skeptical as to why Trey and Bogdan sat out, and really all the starters sat out, and the Hawks blew the lead they took at halftime. Nate McMillan's got to stagger Trey and Bogdan's minutes because it's shown to be the most effective for the team.
Yep.
When you have someone like Lou Williams, he's an all right playmaker, but really where his skill is creating shots. Having someone like that cannot create plays for others as well is very limiting to players like Herter, like Gallinari, Tony Snell if he gets back into the rotation.
Yeah, who rely on open shots.
Open shots, and you're going to need Trey or Bogdan to come in and just be willing and ready to attack the Sixers. The last point I'll make is that the Hawks just in the first round, a very young team. It looked like, with a lot of, they didn't. There's close to no playoff experience on that team. So against the Knicks, who top defense, one of the top defenses in the league, the Knicks played very physical. The Hawks
matched that physicality.
On the defensive end, yes.
Yeah.
On the offensive end, again with the Trae Young foul baiting, I don't believe that was accurate because the Hawks did not look to attack and draw fouls. The Hawks did not know. They were worried about how the game was going to be officiated. They were worried that they weren't going to get the calls because the playoffs is a more physical game. They're not going to give some of the cheap calls. So the Hawks were last in the league in free throw as a team in the playoffs for free throws attempted per game. I believe we were the only team under 20 free throws per game. You got to look at players to be more aggressive. Herter, as Vince Carter, who commentates on the Hawks game sometimes, played with Kevin and always keeps telling him, be aggressive. Herter's surprisingly athletic. You got to look to those guys to go into the paint, to draw contact, and get to the free throw line, because with the Sixers' very impressive defensive lineup, it's going to be very tough to outscore them.
Yeah. And so, on the final note, I'm going to make my 2 predictions. So, without Embiid, if he doesn't play at all in this series, I'm going to go with Hawks in 6. But if Embiid plays, even if he's not 100%, if Embiid plays just his impact, I think the 76ers will win it in 7 games.
7? All right. If Embiid does not play, I can see the Hawks taking this, as he said, 6 games. But without Embiid, I'm going to have to go...
you mean with Embiid?
With Embiid. I'm going to have to go Sixers in 5.
Sixers in 5? Wow, even if he's not 100%? Okay.
Unfortunately, as a Hawks fan.
Yeah, I know, it's tough. But, all right, well, definitely... thanks for being here. Definitely,
thank you for having me.
Yeah, definitely a fun time talking basketball. And so thank you for watching the Talking Atlanta Hawks Hoops podcast. And I'll definitely be back for recaps for each of the Hawks games after each game with the 76ers. So stay tuned for that. I'll catch you later next time.